Good morning, guys. How's it going?
Now, not so
Beautiful,
good because
mate.
you're... No, I'm kidding. I was going to say not so good because you're back, but no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was like in a very remote town in Colombia because a friend of mine had a birthday, and I was expecting the house to have Wi-Fi, but when I connected to the Wi-Fi, it was like super glitchy, and it was gonna be a trouble with the guest. So sorry about that.
Oh God.
It's fine. It's fine. I think we did well. I hope.
Yeah, I think actually it was a beautiful episode. I think it's one of the greatest episodes that we've had, one of the realest that we've had. So
You owe an explanation to our guest, though. So
I actually already reached out to Nadia and I explained myself how I did know about her not having Spotify. So I'm fine.
Good to know.
Okay,
Yeah, everything myself already. So the lineup today, we're missing Luis because he says he has the allergies, so the cold. And that's how kids call hangover these days. No, I'm kidding. It's like, it's spring and, pollen and shit. And, well, the poor has a little bit of allergies. We miss you, bro. But anyway, let's just jump right into our guest. We have a very, very interesting and quite savvy mind. He worked as a business analytic manager at Utopia, understanding the whole flow of money so that right holders can collect money in the most fast and efficient way. And today he's also working as a consultant for a right holder company called MusicBird, where he analyzes the best strategies and tools so that this company can collect from the users that they own. I've had like very long and never boring conversations about the industry, trying to solve it, discussing about business moves, trends. I am very, very excited to have this conversation today. So guys, let's receive Alex Awad.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
How are you, Alex?
Man, really, really good. Excited to be here. When you proposed it not too long ago, I thought, yeah, great idea. We already have such interesting conversations about these things. Why not record one and just put it online and see how it does?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Honestly, thank you for borrowing us your time. And just to give our audience a little bit of context, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I graduated from university in 2020 in the UK. Where I was studying philosophy, politics, and economics, so nothing to do with music. But by the time I graduated, I needed a job, preferably an internship, because I still didn't know what I wanted to do, so I wanted to keep my options open. And I stumbled upon this company called Utopia Music because a cousin of a friend or someone had been an intern at this company while it was still a very, very small startup. So I joined Utopia Music in the summer of 2020, and at that point, it was a company of, two founders, 3 or 4 other sort of seniorish business people, and maybe 30 developers at that point. And in the 2.5 years that I was at Utopia Music, it grew to a company of around 1,000 plus employees. It acquired multiple businesses across many different strands of the music industry in the process. So there was a physical distribution, a digital distribution company, a publishing administration company, music metadata and tagging company, emotional metadata tagging company, and many other ones. So basically at Utopia Music, I was exposed to a lot of different sectors of the music industry, and always with the focus on trying to optimize these different sectors and trying to use the latest technologies to improve them, make them more efficient, make them more profitable for all the players involved in those sectors. So yeah, I was really fortunate to work with plenty of experts from all of these corners of the industry, and learn from them and also help them out in my capacity as sort of, as you said, eventually a business analytics manager, which was a lot of market research, a lot of competitor analysis and stuff like that, and seeing where sort of Utopia could position itself in the market with the products or solutions that it was offering. So yeah, that leads me to where I am today, where I've been doing a little bit of consulting with this rights acquisition company called MusicBird. But that's coming to an end. Actually, yesterday was my last day there. And on Monday, I'll be starting with FUGA and doing licensing
That's
at
amazing.
FUGA. Yeah, so now I'm here.
That's very cool, man. Congrats about the position, by the way. And what we've been very keen here in the podcast, specifically this season, about and understanding mostly the flow of royalties. We did like very interesting conversation about streaming, and from the conversations that we've shared, I know that you have a big understanding of how the money flows, but from and from an editorial side and specifically from radio and TV. So can you explain us the whole flow of the money from point A to point Z when radio and TV are using the music?
Yeah, I will. So if you'll allow me a little monologue now, I could take you through it. So
go for it. Go for it.
So it takes some time because it's not straightforward at all. It's also different in every territory and every country and every PRO. So I'm going to start sort of as generally as I can, and then also give examples country by country so that, it comes to life a little bit, the story of how these monies move across the different countries and different royalty chains. So I guess the first thing we should touch on is, why are we even talking about broadcast royalties in the first place? I think there's this common assumption that radio is fairly insignificant now that streaming's come around. And I don't think people have any idea just how much TV generates in terms of music royalties, but I'll paint the picture a little bit. Also, as an introduction, we are talking publishing royalties right now. So composition rights, not sound recordings. So in 2021, CISAC, which is the sort of global governing body of PROs around the world, collected across all the world 9.6 billion euros in publishing royalties. So publishing is roughly a 10 billion euro industry in the first place. And out of that 9.6 billion, 3.6 billion of that came from broadcast, meaning TV and radio. So that's 37.5% of all publishing royalties coming from TV and radio. So not insignificant. And to give you a comparison to digital, for example, that same year, 2021, which is the latest year we have data on, 3.12 billion euros came from digital. So that's actually less than broadcast. Now, that number is a little bit misleading because CISAC only counts the royalties coming through the PRO system, and there's some digital royalties that are being licensed directly by the publisher. So roughly, we'll say it's about even. Broadcast and digital are producing about the same amount of money for the publishing industry as of today. So how does that money get collected in the first place? Because we know that it's coming from TV and radio stations, but how does it go from the TV and radio stations to the PROs and eventually to the songwriters / publishers who own the catalog? So as we mentioned before, every country is different. So I guess the first question we should touch on is, why are PROs collecting these royalties in the first place? For example, why aren't rights holders licensing them to the radio stations directly? And the simple answer is that it's not practical for every rights holder to go and agree a licensing deal with every radio station and every TV channel in the world. So as a solution that was come up with, 100 plus years ago, these performing rights organizations got together and offered all the rights holders in their territory, because usually they're country by country, and said, we will manage your catalog and collect for you all of the radio royalties and TV royalties that you're due. And so that's what we call collective management, basically. So how do the PROs collect money from the broadcasters? So step one in the royalty chain, how does the money go from the radio stations and TV channels to the PROs? And the answer to that is blanket licenses. And a blanket license is something that the PRO sells to the radio station and says, hey guys, if you give us X amount of money, we will let you play every song you want to play for a year, okay? So on a yearly basis, they license them with a blanket license, which, as the name suggests, offers you a blanket right to play whatever music you want to play. And the price of these blanket licenses is usually as a portion of the revenues generated by the radio station. So say a radio station generates $100,000 a year, then the PRO will probably charge them somewhere between 5 and 10% of their net revenues for the blanket license fee. So that's step one. Now the PROs have collected money from the radio stations. And the next problem is to understand how to distribute that money to all the rights holders. So the PROs collect all the money, they're sitting on it. And of course, the ideal situation here is that they know exactly every song that was played across every radio station and TV channel. And therefore, they can distribute the money to everyone who was played on these stations and channels. However, it's not really that simple. The way that PROs try to understand what's being played across these radio stations and TV channels is through either cue sheets, which are used for TV most of the time, where sort of a TV production has to submit to a PRO which songs are used in this production. And then for radio, there's the equivalent, which is airplay lists, where a radio sometimes is asked to just fill out either electronically or sometimes still manually on paper, which songs they've played in a given period of time. And then there's the most effective solution, which is being implemented across some of the better PROs, is audio fingerprinting. And what audio fingerprinting is you're basically using Shazam, well, not actually Shazam, but a Shazam-like technology to listen to all of the radio stations and TV channels and automatically take snippets of every song that's found on these radio stations and TV channels and compare it to a large database of every song ever made, pretty much, so that you can automatically recognize which songs are being played. So in terms of accuracy and tracking correctly, audio fingerprinting is the future, and it's what's being used across some of the bigger radio stations and the bigger TV channels. However, we do have the issue that it's a bit expensive. It's not necessarily cost efficient all the time. And because the PROs are licensing some very, very small radio stations and TV channels as well, they make the argument that it's actually more expensive to track all of these stations and TV channels than it is to not track them. And therefore, if they were to track all of these radio stations and TV channels, rights holders would be losing money because it would cost the PRO money to be tracking all of these stations. And so that's a pretty fair argument. The PRO's entire purpose is to collect money and distribute it to rights holders as efficiently as possible. That is their mantra. They live and exist for their members. And there's a sort of competition between accuracy of distribution and efficiency of distribution, because if they want to be more accurate, then they have to get a little bit more expensive, and they can also swing the balance the other way. And so this is sort of the reason that every PRO gives for not tracking 100% of the radio stations and TV channels in their country. Now, this is not perfectly adherent to most copyright law around the world. Copyright law, the most basic sort of tenet of it is that if a copyright is exploited, then it should be commercially remunerated for its exploitation. But right now with the PROs and the broadcast sector, we have the issue where they're not tracking everything that's being played. Instead, they're focusing on the biggest stations and the biggest channels and making sure that they get those ones right. Whereas on the rest of the stations and the rest of the channels, there's many, many songs being played that simply aren't being tracked. And therefore, if you're that unlucky person being played on a small radio station, you won't receive a penny of that play. Your music can get exploited without you getting paid for it, which is not ideal, of course. And I think it's something that many people and many companies are coming to realize that, well, we have the technology to do better. Maybe it's still a bit expensive, but surely eventually, we can make it cost efficient in a way that we can enforce copyright law to the letter of the law in the way that it should be protected. So yeah, to give you an idea of sort of how much tracking is being done in which ways, PRS states, so PRS is the British Royalty Collection Society for Publishing. They state that they track around 250 commercial stations using census, which means that they fingerprint and track every single song that's being played on these. They say that they do, so now we're talking about the different methods of distribution, okay? So you have census, which is when you know exactly what song's being played and you're distributing royalties based on the fact that you know exactly. Then, as we said, not all of them are being tracked perfectly. So they have 22 stations that are being tracked by sample. And what a sample means is that they're asking the radio stations to submit, say, 4 days or 10 days of airplay data and using that to extrapolate across the entire year. So if you happen to get played on that day when the sample was being taken, good news for you. If you happen to be played on a day where your sample wasn't being taken, bad news for you. You're not making any money. And then the final method, which is one that's used very, very often and basically as a gap filler for anything that we don't have data for, is purely by analogy. And so PRS claim that they distribute 107 stations based on analogy. And what an analogy is they basically say, well, this radio station although we don't track it, it's pretty similar to this other radio station that we do track. Therefore, we're just going to assume that this one that we don't track plays exactly the same things as this one that we do track. And so to take you back to the numbers, 250 stations in the UK tracked by census, so perfectly, and 107 tracked by analogy. So that's nearly half the amount that are being tracked perfectly, that are not being tracked at all, and simply being substituted for one that they are tracking. So it's imperfect, as we can see. It's not a perfect system. There are sort of data issues in the sense that we don't always know what's being played, and therefore we need to make up something in order to distribute the royalties according to some sort of formula. And yeah, that's the situation with sort of radio and TV royalties at the moment. Unless it's being tracked by census, which only typically the biggest stations in any country are, then the rest of them are probably not being tracked perfectly or correctly. So now we've understood how the money gets from the radio stations to the PROs, which is via the blanket license fee. And we've also understood what the PROs do with that blanket license money. And what they do is that, say, BBC Radio pays PRS a huge amount of money, then the value of one spin on BBC Radio will be worth a lot of money because it's being tracked by census and BBC paid a huge license fee. Now, a much smaller radio station will pay a much smaller license fee to PRS because, as we said, it's as a portion of the revenues of the radio station. And therefore, a spin on that radio station will be worth less money than on BBC. So that's how it goes.
Just to give our audience a reference, and I know it's a tricky and assy question because it sucks the question, but just for our audience to have an idea, how much is it worth a radio play in BBC or in a small radio station? I know, and I want to let our audience know that it depends on the time, on the day, and on a lot of variables. But if you could give any sort of anchor value for our audience to like.
Absolutely. So these values change all the time. However, roughly speaking, BBC Radio 1, BBC Radio 2 pay around £20 per minute. So if you play a 3-minute song on one of these huge BBC radio stations, you're making about £60. So big money. And then it goes all the way to completely insignificant, 5 cents per minute on a tiny, tiny little radio station. So yeah, that's the high end of it and the low end of it. And then there's everything in between, of course, depending on which station you're being played on.
Perfect. And regarding, this is more of because I also studied economics and I'm very nerd with economics. So also stop me if I go too nerd with the question, but I'm amazed by the fact that radio and TV, as you said at the beginning of the explanation, it's roughly the same as digital. But are they the variances too different? Because I was imagining, as you explained that, and I think part of the answer you just gave me points towards the direction. Maybe they distribute the same amount of money, but I can guess, and I don't know if you know the answer or not, but that TV and radio is way more, has a bigger variance than digital. Could that be true? In the sense of they are paying, from the 100% that they pay, they are paying, let's say 97% in terms of the biggest streams and revenues, while digital is paying more equivalently across artists. So to bring it even more down to earth, I would say if I had to have a guess, an independent artist makes more in digital than in radio and TV. If you know where I'm going with the question.
I see what you mean. I think you mean that, BBC radio will be pretty limited to the top major earning artists.
Exactly.
Whereas digital is an even playing field.
Exactly.
And yeah, frankly, I don't have any data to confirm nor deny that, but I think logically that makes sense. I think logically we all know that, you have a better chance of receiving reasonable listenership on streaming and online before you do on radio. I think now, the chain used to be radio first and then popularity. Now the chain is actually radio is more towards the end of that line. Once you've popped up somewhere else, then maybe you get access to certain radio play. So I think you're right. Would be interesting to see some data on that, but yeah, never seen it.
And one of the things that we were discussing is that there are different cultural kind of impacts that each radio station has, right? And there is a certain amount of money that the radio station will pay to the PRO. And I'm taking these questions out of Max's mind. And I found it fascinating because like who is like putting these questions, like who is setting these standards, who's setting these formulas, who's setting this impact, so these radio stations have like value, their airtime has value, and therefore they can pay in a specific amount to an artist.
So this is up to each PRO to determine their own distribution formula. And they all have very different ones, even if there are some sort of common threads of, typically if one radio station pays them a large blanket license fee, then that radio station will be more valuable in terms of distribution as well. But yeah, it's very, very different. And it's funny you bring up that cultural factor, because for preparing for this, I went into GEMA's distribution policy, so the German PRO, and they list 10 reasons that constitute their cultural factor, because as part of their distribution formula, how they calculate the value of each spin on each radio station, they have one coefficient, which is a cultural factor. And there's 10 reasons that they give for this cultural factor. And I'll read them out now if you're interested.
Of course.
Basically, the first one is proportion of German language repertoire. So if a radio station plays more German language repertoire, then it has a higher cultural coefficient, which can mean a higher royalty payout. Second, you have proportion of, and this is a funny word, serious music, aka jazz and other sophisticated vocal and instrumental music. And I'm reading this out of their distribution policy, so these are not my words.
Oh boy.
This is Gemma's words. And you'll find a similar thing, by the way, in STIM in Sweden. I remember they also had a cultural factor for their works that was sort of genre-based in a sense. Then, we might not need to go through all of these. Some of these are a bit non-interesting, but yeah, this one that's proportion of niche repertoire beyond the mainstream. So I guess they do sort of, give credit to people who are not just playing completely mainstream music and maybe contributing to musical diversity in the country in a sense. And on that note, they also have another one that contributes to the cultural factor, which is program diversity measured by the number of different music works per channel. So
interesting. And you know, like what, and I was reading the same document, and I would guess that if they will be playing something like national, like something from like a German artist or something like that, there will be more incentives from GEMA for radio stations to play national music, to stimulate their own thing. But my question goes specifically like from your experience and understanding that this process is not perfect, it's far from perfect, which has been like that you've seen that, okay, they are trying their best and this is like as accurate and probably as it can get. Probably can get better, but they are doing like a very nice job. And what are they doing?
Yeah, if you're asking me to sort of name and shame different PROs.
That's a hot question. I was about to say that's a really hot question right there, man.
Let's just celebrate the ones that are doing good job. Like,
exactly. That's all I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to do, because there's enough shaming of PROs going on without me adding on to it.
My God.
So look, the ones that I can say are at least the most transparent, meaning the ones that I've been able to understand because they produce the documents for me to actually understand what they're doing. PRS are very good. PRS publish a per minute tariff list for all of the radio stations that they track. So if you wanted to, compare that list to your royalty statement to make sure everything was calculated correctly, you can. GEMA are equally pretty solid. They do a lot of tracking themselves or starting with third-party companies to track the radio stations. They also have a very clear document outlining how their distribution policy calculates radio royalties and TV royalties. So those two are very, very strong. As I say, though, they're still not perfect because they're still not tracking all of the radio stations or the TV channels. So in an ideal world, I think nobody's reached this ideal state of radio royalties and TV royalties just yet. The US is complicated because the US don't really have the same requirements to be as transparent about their operations as the EU does. And in the EU, that's because of the copyright directive, the EU copyright directive, which legislatively, I think since 2017, European PROs need to produce what's called a transparency report, which basically is a detailed breakdown of how much money they're deducting from all of the royalties that they're collecting and a bunch of other information about their operation. So there's a lot more information out there about the European PROs and especially the sort of more developed nations, European PROs, than there is about the US, than there is about South America, than there is about Asia and Africa. So that gives us a bit more insight into what they're doing. But in terms of rating them and who's sort of the most efficient and the most effective, hard to say. I guess one measure that's important to take into account when you're doing that is how much are they deducting in costs when they process these royalties for you. And the range will go anywhere from, on the lower end, 8-9%. So the most efficient ones will be deducting 8-9% of all royalties collected before distributing it out to rights holders. And the least efficient ones were going up to 25%. So a quarter of all royalties being collected are being deducted. So supposedly under the guise of management deductions, meaning just the cost of processing these royalties. You know, obviously these PROs have employees, they have tech systems, they have office rent to pay, they have other costs that they need to cover. And that's completely understandable, of course. But I think there's a general consensus that they're probably deducting more than they need to. And even the most efficient ones could get more efficient potentially. And that's, I think, something that causes a lot of publishing rights holders, grievances and annoys them a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think it's super interesting. Like, I've never thought of it before this episode for real. Like the importance on this, the cost efficiency trade that the PROs face. Because like, I guess, and me as a producer, everyone thinks like, why are they not tracking everything? It's so easy. We can do it with Shazam. But as you correctly say, it must be it's not the most cost effective solution. So it's something that really should be taken into account. And I wanted to ask you, Alex, also like, how interconnected are PROs nowadays? Because like that, I think that's another thing. I was checking some documents that you shared with us before the episode, and like I saw that I think PRS, as you said, is the only one that had more or less the same amount of revenue collected from domestic and from foreign. I don't know if I understood correctly. Maybe I understood wrongly, but they seem to be the only one that were so collecting the same amount of revenue from local radios and from, I guess, like external radio plays from other countries. And I found that surprising because like I thought, I don't know, even BMI, for example, if BMI is collecting way too much money from the US than from the rest of the world, it sounds weird to me in a way. Like they should be at least, I'm not saying 50-50, but it's weird that if BMI collects $100, let's say, I remember seeing like 90 came from the US and 10 from Europe, and that's not the difference of the market sizes. So I wanted to ask you more or less how interconnected they are nowadays.
Yeah, so definitely good to clarify, as you did, that we're talking radio here. The numbers I shared with you were radio and not the rest of the royalties. So look, it's a very interesting interplay because to go back to the fees, for example, that we were just talking about, when a PRO collects domestic royalties and distributes to domestic members, as I said, anywhere between 8-9 to 20-25% they deduct. Now, when they find out that music is being played on one of their local radio stations, but that music is administered by a different PRO, then they need to send that money to the foreign PRO and not distribute it domestically. And another thing that's interesting is that a lot of PROs take a further deduction for all royalties collected from international PROs. So to give you an example, there was a calculation I did where I assumed that I was a Swiss songwriter registered to Suiza and that my music had generated $1,000 across 15 collection societies around the world. 15 big ones, so mainly US, European, couple African, couple South American. And then all that money had filtered through those PROs in the foreign countries, been sent back to Suiza and eventually back to me. And if I had made 1,600 in total from all of these PROs, sort of in terms of how much money was collected on my behalf, after going through the domestic management deductions that each PRO took, and then being sent to Suiza, taking the international deductions that Suiza takes, out of the $1,600 that my music would have generated, only 1,218 would have been received by me in the end. And this is already in an ideal scenario. And by the way, that's about 76%. So that's about, 100% of the royalties collected, 76% got back to me, which is worse than the 10, 15% that we were talking about domestic collections, because as soon as it goes through another checkpoint, and this is a good rule of thumb, every time money takes another checkpoint, there's probably a cut being taken along each checkpoint. So yeah, that's one thing, is the money flow. The other thing about international PROs is the data sharing and how sort of intransparent that can be. Because say I'm a Swiss songwriter again, and now Suiza is collecting for me on behalf from other PROs. These other PROs are highly unlikely to send Suiza very accurate data on why my music has generated the money that they've just sent to Suiza. So what you see all the time on royalty statements is X amount of money coming from Brazil, X amount of money coming from the UK. Sometimes you don't even have a breakdown of whether that was from radio, TV, online, broadcast, live and background, whatever it was. You might not even know where that money came from. In the best cases, they do tell you. They'll say, you made $5,000 from radio in the US. But that's best case scenario. Whereas a difference on the sort of domestic level of accounting is that most advanced PROs will be able to tell you your song was played on this radio station at 3:36 p.m. And that generated you $2.50. So that's how good it can be and how good it ideally should be for all sort of reporting. But as soon as that money comes from international sources, the data gets a lot murkier and it's a lot harder to tell where your money's coming from.
Super interesting. Because I think just to follow up, but I'm sorry guys, I'm taking here a little bit
for
of it, but
please.
But there are a lot of songwriters and producers and everything that have the question and ask me, or fellow producers or songwriters, and ask me, what PRO do you recommend me? Or for example, I have a lot of friends that are from, let's say, Chile, and they have a European passport or whatever, or they can get into BMI. So they always is the question, what PRO should I get? And I think now that because many people answer, get the domestic one, regardless if it's worse. And I guess this might give some lights on that answers, because if your music is really going to be played on that country exclusively and not much outside, then it doesn't make much if my music is going to be played a lot in Chile and a lot in Chile and a lot in Chile, it doesn't make much sense for me to register in BMI, regardless BMI being a better PRO.
You're absolutely
that's a question. That's a question that raises a lot, and I wanted to share. I think it's an interesting conclusion for our audience as well.
Absolutely right. Yeah, completely. If you are getting all of your royalties being generated in mainly one territory, then you should be registered to the PRO.
Super interesting.
Because
regardless if the PRO has a worse reputation or is worse in terms of infrastructure.
Absolutely.
It's super interesting.
Because think about the alternative. If your friend goes and registers at BMI, you're still relying on that domestic PRO to send the money to BMI. It's not like you're skipping that middleman or whatever.
Exactly.
You're still going through the domestic PRO. And so to give you the best chance to earn the money that you're due, give your data and your copyright information to that domestic PRO so that they can be as close as possible and have less links in the chain from point A to point B to copyright holder. So definitely you want to be as close to the money as possible. And yeah, another interesting point with this is, as you said, copyright holders can choose where to administer their catalog, whether it's a domestic PRO or a foreign one. And so this creates competition between the PROs. Although the PROs are sort of seen as monopolies in their territories, there is competition, because for anyone who's a global superstar, and I'll take the example here of Max Martin, who is the second most successful.
Oh, dude,
you
just hit
my heart, man. It's my favorite songwriter, producer. Okay.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant.
When I thought things couldn't get better, they got better. Okay.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's brilliant. And it's the perfect example for what I'm about to talk about, because he is registered to STIM, the Swedish Collection Society, as a Swede himself. If you go and check out, he must have had plenty of offers from other PROs to come sign to him. For example, BMI and ASCAP, his music's huge in the US. I'm sure they've tried tons and tons of time to get him to go sign with them. So what do the PROs, how does the PRO's behavior change because of this fact? Because of the fact that one of their biggest earners, who probably accounts for, 5% of all royalties that STIM collects or something, the fact that he could leave at any minute, what does that mean for the behavior of the PROs? obviously, as we alluded to, they have the incentive to be efficient because they are doing these collections on behalf of their members. And a member of theirs, like Max Martin, if he's unhappy with the service he's getting at STIM, he will go somewhere else and he will get his money collected somewhere else. And that's a big hit to the business of STIM because at the end of the day, even if they're non-profit organizations, they are businesses. They like showing that they are growing year on year, and they have members to please. So what STIM does is that they have a 0% deduction fee on international royalties because STIM is the only PRO I know of that collects more money internationally than it does domestically for radio, at least. I'm not sure it's the case across all their revenue streams, but it's the only one for radio that collects more internationally than it does domestically.
90% from Max Martin.
Yeah, I was about to say the same.
Yeah,
Maybe
and that's
real.
because of huge stars like Max Martin, who are so internationally successful that they produce more money in global territories than they do in their domestic one, which is a rare situation. Most of the time, as you said, where you're from is where you make most of your money. But so yeah, STIM don't deduct any royalties on international collections. And you might think to yourself, well, it's not that they don't have any costs when they're processing international royalties. They still have people working in their international department. They still have costs associated with processing these royalties. But it's a bit of a, let's shift the costs to another revenue stream so that we can keep our members happy and make sure that we're processing their international royalties as efficiently as possible. So, for example, STIM, which is generally speaking a very strong collection society, they're very efficient in most of what they do, they deduct roughly 20% from radio. And it's not because it actually costs them that much to process radio royalties. It's probably because they want to be able to deduct zero from their international collections. And so, yeah, that's important for them in order to keep hold of their biggest members and stuff.
But that's very interesting. And it's very, very smart from Steam because they know their market. They know how their producers of their country, how successful they are internationally, that they've made this very appealing for their audience, for their customers, because otherwise they know that they will go to somewhere else for a better deal.
But I think there's a small detail, and I want Alex to correct me here, because I was thinking the same, Jorge, and I would say, then why doesn't everyone go to this PRO? But I would say it's not that I'm sure they have that rule for everyone. I don't think they are like just Max Martin have 0% of deduction, but I would say, or I would guess that if, for example, I register in that PRO, they won't be like, because you have, as Alex said before, also the data part. So they have to be on top of each PRO to check, they still have that cost. So I wouldn't say, it's tricky. It's tricky because it's cool for sure. And it's amazing for Max Martin and for huge songwriters and producers. But I would say for the average one or even below the average or even a little bit above the average, it must not be that great in the sense of that it's hard for them to keep track. If you are not huge, it has more cost, I don't know if I get my point through, but.
And probably since they are not having any percentage from any deductions from international, it's just easy to skip that middleman, and that's it. And it goes back to the question that you asked before about your friends saying,
exactly.
Okay, why shouldn't I go to BMI and not the national one? But in this case, it's easy to go to international one because you can skip the national, local one.
But not the data part, no? And Alex, I'm sorry, here you can give us some light maybe, but what I think is that for Max Martin, the case of Max Martin is easy because it's hard for BMI or ASCAP or anyone deny you that he has sound, and the data must be very easy to acquire or to but if you're a an average songwriter or whatever, go try and see that your song was played once in a radio.
Yeah. So look, STIM might not deduct any percentage from the royalties that they collect from the US and from other countries. And so that is a positive for Max Martin for sure. But Max Martin would still get much greater transparency on how his music is performing on US radio if he were registered with BMI or ASCAP. So frankly, there's no guarantee that STIM is collecting more money for him than he would receive if he was in BMI or ASCAP. Clearly, that's done well enough in order to keep him there. But Yeah, the data aspect is important. And definitely, as a general rule of thumb, like we said before, if you are popular in one territory, register yourself with that territory directly. And I'll give a quick shout out here to companies who do publishing administration, such as Centric, such as Songtrust, because what these companies do is that they go register your copyrights with each PRO around the world, or as many PROs as they possibly can. And I think, the good ones will be members of 75 to 80 PROs around the world, and make sure that those PROs have your copyright information registered directly with them, so that when your song is played on their radio station, they have good copyright information. And of course, all the major publishers will be doing that for you as well. They also understand that if you want to receive your money efficiently, accurately, and as much of it as possible, you need to be as close to the source of collection as possible. Because if you position yourself 5 links down the chain, you're not receiving as much as you should, you're not receiving it as fast as you should, and you have no idea how that money was generated in the first place.
And not only that, like, for example, I read this, I remember this paper, The Impact of Digital Innovation and Blockchain on the Music Industry by the IDB, 2017. They used to say that in certain other industries, you put, let's say, the first one you pay is your supplier, right? But in the music industry, it's like the creator of intellectual property is the last one to get paid. Exactly. And therefore, if you extend, let's say, the value chain, that profit ends up diluting, So I think it's very valuable that we are, let's say, thinking or talking about other opportunities in which we can improve, let's say, this value chain. So how do you foresee in the coming years this changing? Like, if you already know how the money flows in the market, how do you see this changing in the coming years? Are there going to be substantial changes with the interaction of AI or blockchain? That we are talking about this since the start of the pandemic, I believe, but we haven't yet seen a substantial change, let's say, in major territories, major markets. What are your takes on that one?
Yeah, so look, we've been talking about the issue of accurately tracking consumptions. That's been our main point of conversation. But if that's issue number 1 with the PROs, then issue number 2 is having accurate copyright data. Because this is another enormous reason that money gets caught up in the system. Because, say, for example, PRS tracks that this song, X song, was played on a radio station. They might know that, this and that songwriter is due some part of it, but they don't know where the other part is due. Or they have conflicting information in their copyright database that says actually 120% of this song is owned by X, Y, and Z people. And obviously you can't own 120% of a song. So this is another major reason that money gets caught up in the system. And so when it comes to what technology might be able to do to help all of this, there was some hope that blockchain could help with copyright metadata. Frankly, I don't buy it, because the argument was that blockchain as a sort of non-editable ledger of information could provide ironclad copyright data. So that, once one person has registered a copyright, then it is sort of all the information about that copyright, all the metadata attached is solid in a sense. But the issue is that if there's an error in that information in the first place, then you get the exact same problem that we have now, which is that there's conflicting copyright information. And this database says that, but this database says something else. And now what do we do about it? So that has sort of come and gone as a bit of a trend and a bit of an idea that people thought could be valuable. And frankly, there's been no major implementation of that in order to try and solve the copyright metadata issue that holds up many royalties throughout the royalty chains. I think the one thing that I'd like to see more of is just more audio fingerprinted tracking of all of the stations. We have the technology, it works. It's just a bit expensive at the moment to the extent that we only track certain important radio stations and TV channels. And even on the big radio stations, the audio fingerprinting that they're using typically only tracks if a full song is played. But one aspect that's missed often is that there's a lot of commercials on these radio stations that will use a 10, 15-second portion of a song. And that also should generate royalties for the songwriters involved in that. But even PRS, who are very, very strong at what they do, they confirm in their distribution policy that our audio fingerprinting does not track audio from commercials and things like that. So that's an opportunity, by the way, for many rights holders to use some of these audio fingerprinting companies to track these radio stations and catch these commercials that they know their song is being played in, and then make a claim to their local PRO and say, hey, you missed this, you missed that. I have the data to prove it. So here, pay me some more money. So I think audio fingerprinting and tracking should be and will become a lot more widespread, which will just increase the accuracy of the consumption data being used to distribute the royalties. I think one thing I'd love to see is that once the audio fingerprinting is used more widespread, then we'll shorten the period of time between the consumption of a song and the distribution of the royalties of that song on radio stations and TV channels. Because to give you guys some examples, the most efficient PROs will take about 6 months from the point of consumption on a radio station to the point of distribution of the royalties. So in the UK, if you're a PRS member, your song is played between January and March, you will receive the royalties in July. Okay, so that's not bad, but also not incredible. It's not super, super fast. On the other sort of end of the scale, you have GEMA, which does it on a yearly basis. So if my song was played in 2022 on the radio in Germany, and I'm a member of GEMA, I will receive the royalties for that play in July of 2023. They take a full year of consumption data, give themselves 6 months to do the accounting after that, and then make the distribution after that. So that is far too slow, far, far, far too slow. And that's a situation that happens all over the world in many, many PROs. And another thing to consider is that we were just talking domestic radio distributions there. As soon as you add a foreign distribution, so my money goes from England. So remember, played in January to March in England, gets distributed in July. So by July, my money reaches GEMA if I'm a German songwriter. And then it takes another year, maybe more, to get distributed to me. So it can take an inordinately long amount of time for radio royalties and TV royalties to go from consumption to distribution. And that's one thing that with audio fingerprinting, you have the data on what song was being played, when and where, in the moment that it's being played, you know? I mean, depends how you're doing it, but pretty instantly, pretty rapidly, you know which songs were played, when, for how long, and all of that. So with that becoming more widespread, I really hope that we can accelerate the timelines that radio royalties and broadcast royalties in general get distributed on, because right now it's far, far too slow. And I think it's something that doesn't need to be that slow with the technology available. So I really hope to see that get faster in the near future.
Now that we talked about copyright issues, challenges, and possible solutions for the future, I wonder what's your take on AI-generated music? Because if so far it has been this difficult to figure out payments, money flows for the copyrights that we have and their different uses, just to kick off the conversation, I wonder what's your general take on how the copyright and royalty flow is going to evolve or is going to look for AI-generated music?
So I guess before we touch on that, important to say that this is obviously a brand new topic. We've only just seen the first instances of this, and we've seen little to no sort of legislative response. I'll discuss what the US Copyright Royalty Board said about this, but all they gave was an indication. They have not created any laws around this. We don't know how the current copyright laws apply to what's being done at the moment. So everything we're about to talk about is speculation and
absolutely.
Opinions.
Having fun.
Welcome to the sandbox.
Exactly. So it'll probably all be out of date and obsolete within a month, I'm sure. Having said that, here's what we know so far. The current situation is that we've seen a few deepfakes, let's call them, where AI is being used to generate a song in the style of Drake or The Weeknd, which we saw gained a large number of streams. And yeah, it was pretty convincing, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I think most people with a pretty good ear could still tell that it wasn't really those artists, but it was a pretty good song and it was pretty convincing. So it gained a lot of traction, gained a lot of streams. Now, both of those artists are signed to Universal Music Group. So all eyes were on them to see how they reacted to this development. And unsurprisingly, they did what I think most people were expecting. They issued takedown notices to all the platforms. So they asked Spotify, they asked YouTube, they asked all of their platform partners to take down that song because it was infringing on their copyrights. So we know that that's their sort of first reaction to this bubbling up of AI generated music. And that's AI generated music that's trying to impersonate a current artist. Of course, there's many different types of AI generated music. You can ask it to make you a beat, a hip hop beat, and then you can ask it to do maybe write the lyrics as well of something else completely. So there's many different instances, but focusing on what we've seen so far and sort of made waves on so far, there's the issue of, okay, it can impersonate current artists. Grimes, who's another one, was offering anyone a 50-50 royalty split on any songs that they made using AI impersonating her voice. So that was an interesting sort of encouragement of the development, because it was basically saying, yeah, guys, go use my voice, create some new music, go for it. And in the meantime, all I'm asking for is 50% of the royalties, which probably is fairly fair. I think most people would agree that, yeah, if you're going to make a song using my voice, I should be earning some money from that. So that was interesting because she was encouraging it, whereas UMG on the other side were striking it down. They were saying, no, we don't want to hear anything about that. Now, I suspect that UMG did that just because they don't know what they want to do with the AI situation just yet. It's obviously just popped up. And until you have a nice sort of commercial licensing plan or business plan or legal plan, maybe you want to go lobby the governments for certain legal things to be implemented. Until you have that, nip it in the bud. So I think that's what they were doing there. When it comes to legislating on these things, I've thought about it for a while. And it's extremely complicated. The little that we've been given, I don't think I've heard anything coming out of Europe in terms of European courts saying what they think about this. But the US Copyright Board gave one indication of how they view AI music. And what they said is that the use of AI to create music only becomes a new copyright if there is sufficient, which is a vague word, if there's sufficient human alteration or creativity layered on top of that use of AI. So if I try to give an example of this without knowing exactly how the US Copyright Board intends, it sounds to me like, okay, say I used a generative AI platform to make a song or a beat in the style of like Metro Booming, but then maybe I chopped it up, I rearranged it a little bit, I pitched it up and down, I did a few things to it. Then it sounds like the US Copyright Board considers it a new and distinct copyright. But if it doesn't have enough human alteration and creativity layered on top of it, the US Copyright Board says that it's not a new copyright. So it's not even a situation where I can claim any sort of ownership over the thing that I have just technically created using the AI. And so that does beg the question that if it hasn't created a new copyright, but it's still a piece of intellectual property, assuming that it's, a song, a sound recording. If it's a sound recording, it's a sound recording just like any other. So if it's not a new copyright, maybe, and this is my sort of perspective, it's just a blend and a mixture of every other copyright that's already been made, because these AI models can only generate songs and lyrics and music based on everything that's been fed to them, which is, a lot of the music that's been made in the past. And so these generative AI models are taking the sound recordings of probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of songs that are all copyrighted and using them to create a new entity. But that new entity supposedly might not be a distinct copyright. And so from my mind, what I'm thinking about is, how do you monetize this? Because there's no stopping it. The technology's out of the box, and now people are going to use it. It's just about how do we commercially agree to use it or legislatively make it so that it's respecting all of the content that goes towards creating it in the first place, and also monetizing it in a way that everyone who should be remunerated for the development of what's being made is receiving something. And I think what's fair in that situation is a whole nother question, but already we need to think about how they receive anything at all. So I don't know. My idea was that if a new distinct copyright is made or isn't made, and you're making something out of a AI generative program, then if it's not a new and distinct copyright, you have no ownership of it whatsoever. And if you don't have ownership of it, then I think all of the music the program used to create that song does have some kind of ownership over it. And as we said before, actually, I don't think we touched on this, but a lot of music industry royalties, when we don't know who to give them to, are distributed by market share basis. So my idea was that at least in the beginning, or maybe in the future, I really don't know. I mean, there's a lot to discuss and a lot to learn about these things, but maybe every AI generated song is one that only gets monetized on a market share basis, meaning we don't know who contributed 50% of this song and 5% of that song, but we know it was made of AI, therefore we know it was made of everything that's been made of for. So maybe it's just a market share based distribution that's due from the exploitation of those songs. I don't know. That's sort of a theory, which maybe nobody else is thinking about. Maybe everyone's already thinking about. I don't know. Hard to say what anyone's thinking about when it comes to these things already. And there's a million problems involved with that one. So if we want to poke at it and discuss sort of implementing it, we can. But I'd also be very interested in hearing what you guys think on the topic.
To be honest, first of all, it's I agree 100%. Like no one knows, and it's really hard to tell. So we are, as we said, speculating. But as you were talking, Alex, I enlightened, I would say. But I started thinking that I think the situation is going to be or is extremely similar at what happens with sampling and remixing. For me, I'm seeing a very similar situation. And I think it's gonna follow kind of the same path. And I open the debate here, guys, for you to jump in or whatever. But I think it's gonna be very, very similar in the sense of this artist that was encouraging someone to do music AI based with their voice and ask 50%. I can see an analogy of a producer saying, if you want to use the sample of my keyboard in your song and you give me 10%, so I feel it's gonna follow roughly the very same path. And as you were mentioning, Alex, if you make a new copyright based on something, it's the same as sampling. Many times people take samples that are not allowed to be taken, but they take them, rearrange them, pitch them down, up, and you have a completely new thing. No one knows where it came from, but there it is. It's yours. So I feel it's going to follow a really, really, really similar path where, as you say, it's going to be very difficult to determine what are going to be the fair percentages of it. But for sure, I can see a very strong similarity between what happened with sampling and remixing with what's going to happen with AI. That's what a take I wanted to share and open for a small debate, because we have done for long, but
yeah, because what I think might be happening is that, so I was reading a piece of they did an article about, there is a Discord community that has over 20,000 people, and the Discord group is called AI Hub. And what they do is program different systems to create music, and they have over 70 systems already to create voices with major artists, beats, very similar, that can resemble to specific producers and things like that. And what they were saying is that at some moment, we're not planning to monetize from this. It's just another level to take, let's say, fandom. And there were also some others saying that I'm a producer, I will never get, I don't know, Drake or The Weeknd on my beat, but I want to listen how we will sound. So this will give me the possibility, in creativity speaking. And also they say and at some point we hope that probably the major labels figure a way that, or not major labels, right holders, or the same artists to license their voices, because at this point it hasn't, people cannot copyright their voice, although there has been situations where where brands use the voice or sound like voices of actors, and actors have sued back and they have won.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And what I think is that probably is going to go down to a license kind of thing. I think it's going to go down to a license per second thing. If you are going to use my voice for your track and it's going to last, I don't know, 70 seconds, the second is going to have a cost.
Yeah, but so how do you see that? How do you see us reaching that point, for example? Because what I don't see happening is people asking for permission. I think, like you were saying, Max, is that people go and do it and upload it, and then the record companies or whoever owns the copyrights go, oh shit, our stuff's all over the place. And then maybe strike it down, or maybe, you know, go negotiate for 95% of the royalties associated or whatever. It's the kind of thing where nobody's going to have time or the patience to go and ask for permission for everything. So it's just going to happen. And I think the people with the most to protect and the people who are, I think, the most intent on figuring out a solution to this are the major copyright holders, because they know that their copyrights are being exploited in this whole development. So I think there's two options, in a sense, or two general directions they can take. And one of them is a legislative lead, which is to go lobby all of the legislative bodies in different countries to try and implement laws that suit their needs, because obviously they do have a voice in those discussions. Even if they can't necessarily sort of determine what they want the laws to be, they will be listened to in consideration when these laws are being crafted. And I think we are going to need some new laws for this. I think there's not enough in current copyright law to explain what we're supposed to do about this, hence the confusion and hence why we're having this very speculative conversation right now. So that's the legislative lead. And the other one is a commercial sort of approach. It's all right, fine. Copyright law doesn't necessarily have anything to protect our copyrights under these technological developments. Similarly, say to what happened during the streaming revolution, you know, people were using record companies in music. They didn't know what to do about it. They started by striking everything down, and eventually they realized, well, let's just set up a revenue share deal, because that's how we get involved on the growth that's taking place here. So I think something similar could happen in this situation, where the major record holders, by the way, we do have confirmation from, well, not confirmation, he stated, Michael Nash, who's the head of digital at Universal Music Group, in a recent earnings call with analysts and investors, said that Universal Music Group are open to licensing their catalog to generative AI purposes. Obviously, there was no indication of what this means, what it's going to look like.
Legitimate businesses.
Yeah. So anyways, basically he said, we're open to working out some sort of commercial agreement here. We're happy for this development to take place as long as we are compensated for it, of course. So I think what could happen potentially is that the major rights holders and companies go do deals with, and this is the first question, who do you do the deals with? One option is you go to the generative AI companies themselves. Because what you're doing there is you're going right to the source of your problem and you're trying to agree a solution right at the source. And I think those are the companies that have the most to lose, in a sense, by all these rights holders striking down all of their content. Because if I want to use, to be honest, I don't even know the name of one of these generative AI music making companies, but if I'm a user of one of those companies and my music keeps getting taken down from every platform I try and upload it to, then there's not much point in me using these companies. So I think the major rights holders can walk into these generative AI companies and say, hey guys, look, we know you've been stealing all our stuff for now. We're not okay with it. But at the same time, let's come up with a commercial agreement where we would be okay with it. And I think what that could look like would, as I said, be something in terms of revenue sharing agreements, because like what happened with streaming, they basically said, look, we don't know how successful your streaming company is going to be, but whatever success it does have, we need to be fairly compensated for it. So let's do a revenue share, 70-30 roughly. So I think they could walk into these generative AI companies and say something similar. Say something in terms of, hey, look, you're making plenty of music off of our backs. It's okay, but you need to pay us for it. So let's assume, again, a 70-30 rough split where the generative AI companies maybe agree that And here's where implementation becomes super tricky. And I don't know if this is even a plausible scenario because of implementation. This is the hardest part for me, is that, so, okay, the generative AI company and the record labels agree that any music made from that generative AI company is due a 70% royalty share to music companies as a whole, let's say, because Universal will negotiate, Sony will negotiate, everyone will negotiate, but they'll all take a chunk of it. Then, okay, the creators of the generative AI music can supposedly upload it to different platforms now. But then how do you get the money to go? First of all, how do you know which song uploaded to a platform is made from generative AI in the first place? And I think that's where the platforms might need to agree on special partners, the same way that you can only distribute your music to Spotify via a certain list of distributors. Not just now, it gets even more granular. It's like, okay, you can only distribute music via a distributor, but you can only distribute generative AI music via this particular source or something like that. Say potentially the generative AI companies become distributors themselves. They set up agreements with the streaming platforms and go, here, you can make your generative AI music on our platform, and then you can distribute it all over the place. So if that's the case, at least you know that every song coming from that source has been properly licensed and everything like that. And assuming we get that down, because even that is super complicated, like what's to stop me making a song on this generative AI platform, going and distributing it on CD Baby, and how are CD Baby supposed to know, or how is Spotify supposed to, how's anyone supposed to know that that song was AI generated? So complicated, but assuming, it's going through an agreed upon distributor and the royalty split has been already crafted. Therefore, Spotify knows to send 70% here and 30% here, or maybe they send all of the money to the generative AI company, and the generative AI company is then responsible for sharing it across all of its partners who it's licensed. And while I'm saying this, I'm realizing just how bloody complicated this all is, and how it's maybe not even sure.
I mean, it's an absolute headache only thinking about splits. For example, like we see a lot of, let's say, we see a lot of systems that are actually fed by, I don't know, 3 or 4 songs, and you tell them, hey, make a song that sounds like these 3 songs, or a mix of these 3 songs. How do we determine the splits? Like after that, for example, it's impossible. And
I feel it's really hard, but I can see a solution, as you were saying, Alex, as the one you were like proposing, because like I think I go back to the sampling thing. I feel it's gonna be the same. Like if I do an AI generated song and I upload it through CD Baby, like in a quote unquote illegal way, and the song gets 1 million views and I get whatever $2,000, probably Universal is not gonna come behind me to sue me or whatever. But if you do a major hit, then people are gonna start fighting. It's the same as a sample. People are gonna start fighting like that song. If it has 1 billion streams, that song has a sample of me, and I'm gonna fight for it. Like until so I can see that like. Regardless of it having this muddiness that I can see that you're mentioning, and it's absolutely there. I feel it's really the same as sampling, and it might be the same.
You know what? I think I just had a bit of a light bulb enlightenment moment while you were speaking this time, because I think you're absolutely right. I think the major record companies right now, their approach is, we don't want any of it. It's stealing our copyrights, but they might wait and see if any of these songs gather genuine popularity.
Exactly.
And then once they do, just go, hey, well, you made this off of our back, so we'll take 90% of that, which would be commercially interesting. Then they can actually make some kind of money off of it. And maybe that's the smarter sort of in-between step until there's a much more rigid framework in place. Instead of striking everything down, let it happen, take the hits. Yeah.
But if that happens, let's say in the long term, would you see AI companies, let's say, building an interest on entering the catalog, let's say, business? Because if they're going to be like continuously, let's say, generating new copyrights that actually has no base costs, let's say, I mean,
so
I don't know.
I think that's very interesting. You're right. They're developing large catalogs eventually, the more that they make of it. One thing I was thinking about with all of this is sort of whose music is the most easily replaceable, whose music is most at threat because of this. And when I say who, I don't mean a person. I don't mean Drake or Rihanna or anyone. I mean sort of which companies and their types of catalogs are the most easily substitutable for AI music. And the ones that come to mind are all these sync libraries. So companies like Epidemic Sound or Songtrader, you've got tons of music from relatively unknown producers who are not looking for a major payout. They're just looking for a little bit of money as things are done. But in the meantime, now you have a sort of AI assistant producer that can produce whatever you want. So instead of having to search through Epidemic Sound and trying to find the exact thing I want, I think these sync libraries need to very, very quickly implement a service that allows their users to also generate whatever kind of syncable music they want to find. Because there's no sort of star power in those libraries. Those are all songs that can be remade at a very cheap cost. And that's something that companies and advertisers do all the time when they want to have a song that sounds like an Ed Sheeran song, but they don't want to license an Ed Sheeran sync because that's very expensive. Yeah. They'll just commission a composer to go make a similar feel and similar vibe to a song. So now you can have AI do that for you. And that must be incredibly cheap, incredibly quick. And you can iterate as many times as you want to get it just right. And so I think those companies, the Epidemic Sounds and Songtraders of the world, need to integrate a solution that allows their users to do that on their platform. Otherwise, those users will go find a platform that will do that for them.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Dude, this has been amazing. I'm so happy we had this conversation. Man. We can just literally go on and on and on. And I'm very sad to have to finish the episode. But I want to be also mindful of your time. Dude, thank you so much for coming. The mic is yours. Let us know what you have going in your life. What if someone wants to contact you? What's the best way to go?
Any final messages?
Or if you want to, or if you want to leave a final message to our audience, the channel is yours.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you having me on. It was unexpected. When you proposed it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But also, great idea. Let's do it for sure. And it's been everything I thought it would be. Interesting, fun. Debates coming from each side and new perspectives and stuff. So I'm always down for another one whenever you guys want to. I'm here. It's been really, really enjoyable. In terms of plugs and things I want to promote, I mean, I'll be starting with FUGA on Monday, so shout out to FUGA. If there's any independent labels out there who need some distribution, there's nobody better in the business than FUGA for that stuff. So go hit them up. I definitely want to thank MusicBird and Utopia as well, the other places I've worked at, for being excellent workplaces, places that have taught me so much and benefited in my growth so much. So I don't know. Shout out to them, I guess. It's been great experiences that I've been having so far in this industry, and I'm looking forward to keep going throughout the industry and keep learning more. So,
what's the best way to contact you?
Best way to contact me, I guess it would be on LinkedIn. Alex Awad on LinkedIn. I guess that's all I can really give you, Alex Awad.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex, so much.
Thank you so much, man.
People, for you to have been listening until here, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
It's been a long one.
Exactly.
Got lost in the middle, but
no worries. Absolutely gem the whole thing. Thank you for listening, all of it. Tell us what's your thoughts on how the whole copyright with generative AI music will look in the future. We will love to hear what you guys think. And guys, until next week.
Thank you so much.
See you all.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, si ya llegaste hasta acá, muchas gracias por escucharnos. No te olvides de seguirnos en Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora o la plataforma digital que sea de tu preferencia. Si te gustó el capítulo, si te gusta el podcast, no olvides recomendarnos a tu grupo de amigos, colegas. Esa es la mejor manera y la manera más orgánica de que sigamos creciendo esta comunidad. También nos puedes encontrar en Instagram, Facebook, YouTube como 8000 kilómetros podcast, y cualquier comentario, duda, sugerencia para mejorar el podcast es más que bienvenida. Nos vemos en el siguiente episodio.